All right, and we are back. Welcome into another episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets. Today is Thursday, April 11th. Alongside Theodore Pristash, I am Blake Pace. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode. We are just a few weeks away from the NFL draft, and boy, oh boy, are things getting slow and boring between now and then. Theodore, we were just talking beforehand, not a whole lot to get into. We're going to do some dives into top 30 visits, pro day visits, combining who the Jets are frequently meeting with throughout this draft process. We're also going to talk about a draft scenario that we haven't really discussed much yet. But other than that, it's been pretty slow. What's going on in your Jets mind at this moment? Are you just kind of impatiently waiting for the draft?
Yeah. It does feel like the calm before the storm, like we're in the eye of the storm right now. Just because sometimes, pre-draft it feels like there's so many things going on, but then now we're in this weird state where it's like pretty close, but not, tomorrow.
Right.
And it does kind of feel like things are slowing down in terms of the news. I mean, how many times can you just can the national media like go over who they think are going to be the top picks and review the same top guys and all that stuff? So it
Yeah.
does feel a little slow, but we're getting there. I guess it's just one of those things, right? We have the tournament, and the basketball tournament just ended with March Madness. Now we'll get the Masters, and then it's kind of like a week or 2 weeks, and then we get the draft. So it's this weird, kind of like what are we really doing with ourselves time period.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. At least on my end, doing the draft guide, draft newsletter, make sure to subscribe. Link is in the description for the podcast, Google, wherever you find it. So at least that's keeping me busy between now and then. Just put out top 15 edge rushers for the class, got interior defensive linemen coming out Friday, and then finishing out linebackers and secondary next week in the full draft PDF, which is going to be like, I think it's going to be like close to 200 pages when it's all said and done. Is
Like
going
a
to be
book.
out the week of the draft. Yep. So that'll get sent out. So make sure to subscribe, even if you don't really open up the emails, but just want that by the time the draft comes around. Make sure to sign up and get in on that. That's keeping me busy, but you're right. It is pretty slow right now. And outside of like next week, I think it'd be fun to do a mock draft for the Jets, and then maybe the one right before would be the day of the draft or the week of the draft. So I don't even know if we would almost want to talk and put out a pod after the Jets make a selection or what we want to do for that. But between now and then, it is very much just kind of slow news day. And so before we get into everything else, though, I did want to start off with a surprise "Do You Care" segment, which I've only done once or twice with you since we've restarted this under a new name. And it's something that you were just.
One of our most well-known recurring
Oh
segments, you
yeah,
could
recurring
say.
segment. Do you care
Do
for the
you
third time?
care?
Better than the burn book because
We might
that's
have to
only
make
made
a
one
graphic.
appearance. Do you care? Yeah, we'll make that, and
Yeah,
then
like a do
then
you
this.
care?
Do you care? Put a little jingle in
What
there.
was that?
That's our jingle. Do
Do
you
you
care?
care?
Yep.
All right, yeah, we'll get on that. I'll write a jingle, play some guitar, we'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
that sounds great. All right, Teddy, do you care for this week? Uh, the Jets are coming out with an updated logo and jersey combo next week. Do you care?
Um, kind of, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
I feel like that's my answer to a lot of these do you cares. I do care. I'm wearing the new jersey right now.
The new old jersey.
Or at least like the throwbacks. I'm wearing the throwback, which
Oh,
I've talked about it before, but I'm one of the idiots who bought a 17 Garrett Wilson jersey, even though I knew he was changing his number to 5. Um, I did like the Jets uniforms. I think that just and everyone agrees on this really, but
yeah.
the years we had in the new Jets uniforms were just some of the worst years of a football team, especially, from an offensive perspective, like just year after year of having one of the worst offenses in the league. So yeah, to kind of get that stink off it, I really do like the old school logo. I like that a lot better than the classic, which, I really have nothing against. Like in my dream world, I'd honestly probably just go back to like the 2009, 2010 uniforms and just say
Mm-hmm.
that's the Jets.
Yeah.
Um, but I like this old school logo. I think the jerseys will look good. So I kind of care because I think we'll
Kind of
look
care.
better as a football team and not so like kitschy almost. It
Yeah.
felt like we were just trying to do too much with uniforms. Now it seems like we're trying to dumb it down a little bit.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I don't, just because I don't think I care about any jerseys unless somebody comes out
Yeah.
with something that is like disgustingly bad, then I care because I like to make fun of how bad it looks. Um More so the point of me just bringing this up and talking about it was the fact that I just needed to buy a few extra minutes for this show so we didn't finish in like 25
Well,
minutes.
there you
So,
go. There you
um
go.
I believe this is by the way, do you care making its return since we had last discussed Aaron Rodgers potentially becoming the vice president for RFK Jr., which has now since died down. And did I hear Woody Johnson come out and say that it was like a temporary distraction recently? He said something
Yeah,
about
yeah, that
it.
was his quote. Yeah, he was on like Fox News for something and they asked him. Yeah, and it
Classic.
was definitely a very
I wonder why he chose Fox.
he said, Aaron is 100%. Oh, he loves it.
I
He said
know.
Aaron is 100% in on football. He's been focused on football, but then he said that was just a momentary distraction for him. I don't know, maybe like that darkness thing. That's the quote I saw. There's a chance I'm getting duped. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Um, which is a little weird, right? I'm happy it's not a thing, but it is
Yeah.
weird for him to just kind of like you can almost feel like that's just kind of that like first step in like is there going to be some drama, between Aaron Rodgers and the owner and I'm hoping that that's not the case, but it's a little weird, I got my eye on it.
Yeah. Well, at least we don't have to worry about political distractions anymore from our quarterback and he can fully get ready. It Go ahead.
That it's just that like if he was actually considering it, it is a little like were you not gonna be focused on, you know what I mean? But it's like that just seems so unrealistic. But then to
I
hear the owner like talk about it as if it's real, it just is a little mind-boggling.
The only thing to me is that he was like some bigger calling in his life compelled him to consider it. But honestly, I think at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
yeah.
what it probably was is that they thought that he would be like captivating and clickbait and get people talking about
Yeah, and
it
get people
more
talking about
so. So at
RFK.
least
Yeah,
just
honestly, that's
putting his name out there and look, Rogers is a very pro RFK Jr. guy. Like he's come out and spoken highly of him, and I think they actually even have what I
I
would
didn't know
consider a
much about
friendship.
him before any of this, so it does seem like that worked.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
You
we
know
got
what I
people
mean?
talking. Yeah, that's
So
a very fair point.
yeah, yeah. Now I know
Good.
who that guy is.
Yeah. Good. Wait. I don't know.
Well, I
We're
know
not
he's
going down.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
JFK,
Okay.
RFK,
Cool. Cool. All right.
political talk with
We're
Blake and
not
Teddy.
going through this.
Dude, I'm just telling you what I know.
Okay.
What I know
Good.
is RFK sounds like JFK.
It does. It does. I wonder if they're related or something.
They gotta
We'll have
be.
to
They
look
gotta
on
be
that.
for sure.
All right, good. Look at that. We just bought ourselves like an extra 10 minutes of this show.
Dude, you act like we don't have
No,
tons to talk about.
we will end up making this into a pretty long conversation. So I want to connect dots between the Jets and what we know about who they're meeting with, what pro days they're going to, who they spoke it with at the combine, who they're getting dinners with, who they're bringing in for a second visit, who's coming for the local pro days. Um, I will say there's two general thoughts as far as like top 30 visits come from. And what does that sound like? That sounds like each team has 30 prospects that they're allowed to bring into their organization for a day, talk, walk them around, get to know them a little bit better. So there's 30 of those. And then also there's your local guys. So any guy that grew up in the area, went to college in the area, they don't have to be included in that top 30 list because they're more of like a considered homegrown talent and they want to incentivize, maybe getting a chance to know some of the guys from the area. You can also bring in a decent amount of guys that are locals and not have it count against your top 30 visits. So we're sitting here. It's April 10th when we're recording this. There are going to be visits that have not been scheduled yet, that have been scheduled and we don't know about, but there's a couple great databases online that keep track of this for every single team, every single prospect. So we have a list here. It breaks down to a few key positions. There's a couple quarterbacks, about five or so wide receivers, couple offensive linemen, a lot of edges, and then some DBs and a defensive tackle. So and they all have had very different types of meetings. Before we get into the players specifically, I want to note something as far as what you can really gain from these top 30 visits or people that the Jets and any organization will be meeting with between now and the draft. All that you can really take and I think connect dots with are more of your later round day 3 prospects that get brought in. Um, those are the guys that you'll see more often than not get grabbed in the draft. The top prospects are more just trying to figure out their positioning in the league, essentially. So, like, we're gonna talk about Malik Neighbors and Roma Odunze. Like, there's a chance, there's a world where they're available at 10, but you're more so bringing them in to get to know a little bit about like where they're stacking up in the league, meeting with other teams, getting a feel for them. So some of these top names, like for instance, I'll use one example right now because we won't spend a lot of time talking about him. Joe Alt, they met with him at the combine. They brought him in for a top 30 visit. There is a 98% chance that he has gone by pick 10, most notably number 7 of the Tennessee Titans. But they're more so just getting a feel of like, okay, say he falls to 8. Is he a player then that we want to move up to 8 to get? Is he a player we
Sure.
want to move up to 7 to get? So when you take a look at all these names, I think the ones that you really need to keep an eye on, they might not be the most interesting ones, but if you want to connect dots and say, oh, the Jets really are looking at this sort of type of guy or this range, that is more for your day 3, rounds 3 through 7 type of guys. So I just wanted to put that note out there before we get started. Teddy, I guess
Yeah,
we're
and
gonna we're gonna flip this around to you as well too for a second and kind of have you maybe dive into this list because not to say that
yeah,
there's
for
a lot of
sure.
guys on here that you do know, but I just finished my top 15 edges, so there's some day 3 guys here that I just got to take a look at, and some other positions there too.
No, yeah, and the only other thing I wanted to say, and I think this is a point that you had made, maybe last year, a couple years ago on this podcast, but it's hard to necessarily know, like, okay, the Jets are meeting with this player who's projected to go in, the third round, but they don't know that that guy's actually going to be there. I
Hmm.
think one of the real interesting things you can kind of take away is just positionally,
Yep,
where their priorities, and it's not always, the biggest surprise, but, it's not like the Jets have this abundance of picks this year like they kind of have previously, they're going to have to be more targeted, I guess, with each pick, each selection that they make. And if they want to, be addressing a need at certain positions, they have to be kind of intentional about that. So when you look at these, lists and just see kind of the volume of guys that they look at different positions, that's one of the things I like to take away from it as well.
totally agree.
Um, but yeah, so I think, going through this position group by position group, I think is our best bet.
Yeah, I agree.
I can read out the names of guys they've met with, and then, just kind of open it up to get your thoughts and, you know, whatever really
Wherever the
wherever you want to
conversation
go with
goes.
it, we
Perfect.
go from there. Do
All
you
right.
have any particular group you'd like to start with? Is there one you're more excited to talk about than the others?
Um, I think the edge room and the visits they're bringing in is really interesting. So maybe
The edge,
if
all
that's
right.
where we want to start off with, because I
I
think
like
we've
that because
spent
I think that is a surprising, most people would have talked about tackle, receiver. We've done it a ton. I like that you're bringing up the edge group.
And that's exactly why, because we've looked at all the wide receivers that'll probably be there in round 1, the tackles that'll be there in round 1. And we agree if the Jets do try and find a way to get back into round 2, it'll most likely be for the other one of that position. If they go wide receiver
Sure.
first round, then tackle second, offensive line first round, wide receiver second. But edge and a lot of these guys that they're taking a look at edge. And I'll run through the names right now. You've got Chop Robinson from Penn State. They brought him in for a top 30 visit. Marshawn Nealon out of Western Michigan, top 30 visit, and they attended his pro day. Mohamed Kamara grew up in New York. He went to Colorado State, so he was brought in for the local pro day. Javante Jean Baptiste, Notre Dame edge rusher, brought him in for a top 30 visit. And then Jalix Hunt, Houston Christian, they had a private meeting with him, as I don't believe
I
there
like
was
that
a
name,
pro day.
Jalix.
Yeah, he is a really fun story. I can't wait to talk about him. But those are the guys that we know of so far that they've brought in. So it's not any of the, Liatu Latu, Jared Verse, Dallas Turner guys that'll be in round 1. Chop could sneak in there. He would be the one I'd say if there's a guy in this list that probably will never be in the Jets range, it would be Chop Robinson. But all the other guys, you're looking mid, late day two, a couple of them early day three. So that's to me where it gets most interesting because, like you said, the conversation's been wide receiver and offensive line so much that I don't think we're looking at what the Jets are really gonna target and attack in the with their later picks in this draft.
Yeah, no, I think that's good deductive reasoning. I also think it's interesting, a lot of times, even if they're not necessarily considering taking, one of the higher up guys, I feel like they'll try to get guys like that in for visits, and we obviously don't necessarily have the full list, but I do think that the potential of the Jets taking an edge rusher with their first pick has been such a divisive topic, and
Yeah.
not even divisive. I feel like most people agree on it, but it brings the flames out of people because people would just be so annoyed if that happened. Looking at this list and kind of those overview, it does give you a little bit of sense that maybe that's not what they're looking to do with that first pick, as expected as that may be. Still good to point
Right.
out.
The one thing that interests me is, I mean, and it makes sense because if you think of Salah's upbringing, it's this defense, strong defensive coordinator, the eight deep that along the edge room, and Joe Douglas coming from Philadelphia and Baltimore, they are consistently building through the trenches. That is where they know that they're going to have the best job, honestly, at evaluating talent as well too. That's their strong point. So they know a good edge rusher when they see one. Um, the only thing when I take a look at Chop Robinson, it kind of reminds me of how they went corner and wide receiver a couple years ago, but then they called every team trying to get in there to get Jermaine Johnson. Chop Robinson, I don't think as much as I would want to take him in the first round, but early day two, there's going to be a run on wide receivers. There'll be a couple quarterbacks. But, he should probably be the top available edge guy in round two. There is a scenario I could see if the Jets wanted to get aggressive and try and get up, he would be that guy there. Maybe Marshawn Nealon as well, too. He's been getting a lot of late push. And ever since even his pro day, I think people have been hyping him up as a guy that could go round two. But Chop is someone that I don't know if there was something, if there was a guy that they would be calling and picking up the phones and trying to get a deal done early day two, that would be the guy. So it all depends how the meeting went, how high they view him compared to others. But um, I, I would be extremely surprised if they did it to trade back into round one. But I could definitely see them doing it early day two if he's still hanging around for a while.
Yeah, and that is, just a point of appreciation to Joe Douglas. He's never really been scared to trade, in the draft just
No.
generally. And so I think it kind of always keeps us all on our toes, that you don't really know if maybe that Jets logo all of a sudden pops up and you're getting one of these guys. I will say, spoiler alert, but of the list we have of available players, the edge room, they have five guys interviewed. That's tied for the most of any position group. It does seem like this is obviously, a focus for them, which I think makes sense. They obviously have Will McDonald and who'd we just sign? Hassan Reddick
Yeah.
and Jermaine Johnson, but still a room that feels like you could add talent, add depth. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Do you have one guy on this list? I mean, I know you said you want to talk about Jalen Hunt.
Yeah.
Why don't you
There
dive in? Is he your top on this list, or is it just the most
No,
intriguing to you?
there's two that are really intriguing to me, and it's Muhammad Kamara from Colorado State, the New York kid, and then Jalix Hunt as well too. The Muhammad Kamara, I just got done with him, and what was most interesting to me is you're trying to find like and player comps. You don't want to just try and force to say this is this person. So I like shades of this guy or how do they match up size wise, athletic testing. Who do they look like on the field at times? Muhammad Kamara is a lot like Bryce Huff, like a lot. Size wise, he's not the biggest guy in the world. He is not going to be your run defender, at least initially in the league, but he almost uses that smaller frame and a really strong athletic profile to be a terrific pass rusher. So he is somebody that, like, when I see that they have brought him in for the local visit, and he's a guy that is getting some early day three late round 3 buzz as well too on day 2. His style does match Bryce Huff, where you could also say there's so much untapped potential being at a smaller school and not getting the level of competition that he would want. You could see his trajectory being the same as Bryce, where maybe he builds up a little bit more play strength. You're probably still not going to put him out there, on first and second down, but on those passing downs in a wide nine, the fun thing about undersized edge rushers is when they've got that ability to bend against larger NFL tackles, you can't really put your hands on him. And especially when he's got the good contact balance as well too. He's a guy that is really interesting to me where if the Jets have that same opinion and they're like, well, we just lost Bryce Huff. We've got Hassan Reddick here for basically 1 year. We may not feel as confident in Will McDonald's development. It doesn't hurt to have that guy here because it's not like you're drafting him in the first round to be Will McDonald's replacement. You're not drafting an edge to do that. But when you need depth at the position, it is nice to find a guy that I think has a lot of similar traits to a guy that you did just let walk and kind of almost reinforces the opinion that maybe there's things that we didn't, maybe Bryce Huff is more of your pass rush specialist. Maybe he isn't that 3 down guy.
Sure.
There's a chance it all pans out in Philadelphia and he is, but it just reminded me again watching a guy like him, smaller school, smaller frame, but really athletic and just great pass rush skills. Um, he was a guy that popped off to me like if you wanted to connect a guy to the Jets day 3, this is where you would get like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense why they drafted that guy.
Sure. Yeah. Local too. Little
Yep,
Rutgers story.
exactly. And then just real quick on Jalix Hunt, I just like he is one of the more not necessarily fit wise, but just the joke that we always made that Robert Saleh loved drafting safeties that then he tried forcing to play linebacker.
Yes.
You would draft
Yes.
them and just Hamza and Azirildine, like all these guys that,
Yeah.
converted linebacker from safety. Jalix Hunt is a 285-pound edge rusher, 254, I think, actually. Sorry. So he's a little bit on the smaller side. I didn't mean to say 280. Let me pull it up
Yeah.
exactly.
280 sounds. I
252. So he's a lot smaller than what I was saying. 252. But 2 years prior, he was a safety at Cornell
Oh
University.
my gosh. Well, there
So
you go.
so he was playing at 195 2 years ago. He was a high school wide receiver. So he's gone wide receiver, safety at Cornell, now at Houston Christian as a defensive end, and is going to be entering the league at DN. And you see so much of the linebacker to DN, safety to linebacker. To transition from safety at the back end to defensive end is not something that
Yeah.
you come across a lot. Really helps him in his run defense ability. He's got great vision and kind of can read those outside runs. So he's a guy that to me is just fun because you're like, how did you get to this point? So it's fun that the Jets got to have a private meeting with him. I don't know if there was necessarily a pro day done at Houston Christian, but they did make an attempt to get out and meet a guy like that at a smaller school. 2 FCS stops along his way between Cornell and Houston Christian, and just a really fun, different kind of prospect that you don't come across much. Freak athlete.
Yeah, it seems like the kind of guy in NCAA you would have, he would have just had the athlete tag
Yeah,
and you just
exactly.
decide on his position from
Exactly.
there. But
Exactly.
no, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, all right, yeah. Well, I mean, I think we should go from the number one group to the tied for number one group in people that they interviewed. Back to the wide receiver room where, you know, there has been a lot of buzz, but I do think these are kind of the names that really have resonated with people. I especially, this seems like a very deep wide receiver class. And if you look at the draft over the last, 5 years, early first, second round receivers have a very, very high hit rate.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are some interesting names just in general. Plus, all the other guys who aren't on this list, I think there's a lot of different avenues the Jets can go to add one more receiver to really add some depth here. So yeah, I mean, I'll just read these names: Malik Neighbors out of LSU, Romo Dunze out of Washington, Troy Franklin out of Oregon. They met at the pro day. Roman Wilson out of Michigan, been hearing a lot about him. And then my boy, Brendan Rice out of USC, Jerry Rice's son. So of course he's become one of my favorite players, guy I'm rooting for. Um, I don't really know where you want to start here. Obviously, the two names at the top, Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, feel like they're going to be top 10 guys, potentially not even going to be there. I mean, do you want to
Yeah.
start with them?
I think there is one really interesting thing about Malik Neighbors as we get closer to the draft is everybody agrees there's a top three. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. at number one. Most people say Malik Neighbors at two, and then Rome Odunze as three. I have them as three of my top seven overall players in this draft. I think seven or eight. It's probably seven if I'm, yeah, seven. But three guys that you're like undoubtedly will be top 10 picks. The interesting thing is, as you get close to the draft, teams now look at fit, and that changes their preference a little bit. And it's not just fit into the offense; it's fit into what other receivers we already have. So, the Malik Neighbors meeting is interesting to me because the more you see what teams he's taking meetings with, I'm now starting to think Roma Dunze might be wide receiver two off the board. And they're very different type of wide receivers. Malik Neighbors is separation. He is the vertical threat. He's an alpha guy that just like he gets open. Roma Dunze is more just like the I'll make any contested catch, just throw me the football. So they're two very different fits and will be have very different roles depending what team they want to end up going to. So the thing that stands out between the two is that Malik's my number two overall player in this class. He is just a hair behind Marvin Harrison for me. He would be the top wide receiver prospect of the last decade if it wasn't for Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I think he goes and rivals even as great as Amari Cooper was coming out 10 years ago. CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase. I think he's a better prospect than all three of those guys. So it's really interesting to see the Jets take a meeting here. And it's something we're going to say for later in the conversation at the end of this podcast about a different draft scenario than one we've discussed. But the fact of Malik Neighbors falling to that 7, 8, 9 ranges is something that we have to consider because there might be a team. The Chargers might like Rome Odunze as their fit at 5 if they want to stay put. The Giants might like him as their fit. They've already got their vertical threat in Jalen Hyatt. Not the same kind of receiver, but you're trying to build a complete, well-rounded receiver room. You don't just want to have 4 speed guys. You don't want just to have 4 possession guys or 4 slot guys. So that's what stands out the most to me. It's nice to see that the Jets are taking meetings with the top wide receivers because that lets
Yeah,
me at least know that
100%.
they're considering if it fits onto their draft board, if it fits with a trade partner, like those could be two names that we see taken at pick 10.
Yeah, hey, I'd be super in on it. I heard I was listening to a different podcast the other day. I can't remember which one. And they were kind of talking about these top three receivers in Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze. And they were like, yeah, I mean, you have three guys here who would all be top receivers in their class and give you that like Jamar Chase-esque type prospect. And like to
Mm-hmm.
just hear that was like, holy shit,
Yeah.
Um, that is big, big praise. And to have
Mm-hmm.
three of those guys in the same class is just crazy. I love Malik Neighbors a lot. I like Rome as well. But haven't really even considered the thought Malik wouldn't be, taken at that five,
Right.
6 range. So that would be interesting if he started to fall a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I think is just the idea. I've always been like, if it's a wide receiver, it's Roma Dunze, but the we have to start considering the idea that he could be the number two wide receiver off the board, and Neighbors might be that guy that falls to the 7 to 10 range, and it gets really. I mean, the Colts took a meeting with Malik Neighbors. He flew to Indy, and he's picking at 15. So it's like I think there's
Yeah.
starting to be a little bit more consensus that if that he could be a guy available in that range, and if that's the case, trades are going to happen. Teams are going to get aggressive trying to get a guy like that.
Yeah, I don't think that would be shocking. Um, I feel like every year, especially with the receivers kind of parity in the order that they're going to go, because it really does. A team needs a receiver. Okay, who do they like? Like that's all it
Hmm.
really comes down to. Consensus kind of gets thrown out the window there.
Every team has their own
Um,
different kind of board.
yeah,
There's
exactly.
it's just like every draft guide, every draft analyst has their own. Every single NFL team looks at these guys differently.
Yeah. All
Um,
right. So these other three names, I mean,
yeah.
Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, Brendan Rice. Where do you really see these guys going? Second round, late first round, past that? What are your thoughts on these three guys? Would they be around at pick 72? Does it almost feel like a trade would need to happen to get one of those guys? What are your
So
thoughts there?
they all to me go in different stages, which is what I think is really interesting for the Jets right now. And they're three different types of wide receivers too. Troy Franklin is more of your deep threat. He's a little bit more on the balance side as well too, but you would think of him as a vertical threat. Roman Wilson is a slot receiver, so you're drafting him for a very specific role. And then Brandon Rice is kind of just your possession receiver as well too. So they all have different fits. Um, it's funny, outside of the top like 4 or 5 guys that I think could go in the first round, I almost think teams are now going to take the adjustment where they say, "Well, if I can get a really great wide receiver at the end of round 2, why don't I just take the tackle that I desperately
Sure,
need at the end of round 1?" So, Troy Franklin, for a while I was like, "That's a first round wide receiver." I think he's more of a early round 2, mid round 2 wide receiver. Roman Wilson, I love slot guys, but you almost are like late second round, early third round. And Brendan Rice, he's getting so many visits. He is doing a worldwide tour right now because USC was so messy on offense last year. And people really, whether it's scheme, offensive line, you just didn't really get a good feel for any of their skill position players. He's taking meetings with everybody. I view him more as like a day 3 kind of guy. So I think the Jets right now are just kind of evaluating what kind of guy they can get at different stages of the draft. And
sure.
to me, the one that stands out the most would be Roman Wilson because I don't think the Jets would trade up for a wide receiver in round 2. And granted, Franklin could be a guy that goes even after Roman Wilson. That's the thing, is like I'm just basing it off of what I think of the guys, and I could be dead wrong. So Roman
Sure.
Wilson, to me, I might view him as more of like a late round 2, early round 3. He could be gone in the beginning of day 2. Um, but I think when you're drafting a slot wide receiver, that has less of a value, especially when there's guys above him like a Lad McConkey, Ricky Pearsall, that I find more intriguing. So Roman, he's the guy that I think is a really good fit for the offense and kind of almost, not to joke about Randall Cobb and how he was brought in, but he was just a really great guy to operate inside the slot. And Roman Wilson, it's tough to evaluate because Michigan wasn't a pass happy offense, but when you needed him to make a play, he made it. And so that's a reliable guy working across the middle of the field, good possession receiver. He's the one where I'm like, okay, I can see him finding his way into, the rotation here early on his rookie season because we've got, Garrett the alpha, we've got Mike Williams, the kind of deep threat possession, big catch radius type guy. Unless Corey Davis is coming back into the fold, and he was more, he was really fun in the slot for the Jets at times, and same in Tennessee. The slot is that one spot where, like, we tried Elijah Moore at one point. We brought in Randall Cobb. We've had a few guys here and there, but we don't have like the best slot presence right now.
Surefire.
We've talked
Yeah.
about,
Xavier Gibson.
exactly. We've even talked names like Odell Beckham Jr. post the draft. If he signed somewhere, he would be more of your. But the Jets don't have that right now. So to me, Roman Wilson, he would be the one of this second crop that I'm like, okay, I could see him working his way into a an important role for the Jets. Not where you need to rely on him in his rookie season, but he's got a spot almost kind of open for him.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting prospect too, just because he has been so. There's some people who love him who think he's a really, really
Yeah.
great talent, and there's some people who don't, and just don't really see it. So it'll be interesting to see what the Jets think of him there. Um, yeah, I mean, honestly, what I love about this receiver class is I feel like any guy we take in the first like 3 rounds is going to be a pretty like exciting guy you're going to be able to get behind when you have a Garrett Wilson, have Mike Williams to kind of lessen the load, and
Yeah.
obviously, hopefully, Mike Williams is ready right away. But when you have those guys to lighten the load, we're not drafting anyone to come in and be Garrett Wilson, right? They can just kind of be a secondary guy and really just try to grow. So it'll be interesting. I mean, really, any of these 5 guys I would be excited for, and there's a whole other guys list of guys that I would be excited for as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
And they're probably gonna have, like I said, we're doing this April 10th. They've got 2 weeks. They're gonna bring in a few more guys that we haven't even, been able to know about yet, just because of like
Sure.
you got to know what's going to be available for you in day two, because it's not even just how many receivers, it's like all your different types of flavors, your possessions, your vertical threats, your slot guys. Like there's so many at each variety of receiver that you're right. Any team that drafts a guy in the first 3 rounds, you're going to be happy about the guy that you get.
Yeah. And, I think the point that they are going to bring in people, again, this is not a comprehensive list. It's not everyone they're going to bring in. And it's not like the Jets are only going to draft people who they brought in.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
when I do look at this list, to move on to offensive tackle, which I think is for a long time, it felt like the Jets were surefire going to take a lineman at 10. Then they get Tyron Smith, they get Mike Williams, they add three starting offensive linemen. Um, and now, you look at the mock drafts, who's the number one guy for the Jets in all the mock drafts? Now it's Brock Bowers, tight end, a pass catcher. This thought that the Jets are going to, add to their offense, add a skill player. Looking at this list, two offensive tackles interviewed. We have Joe Alt, who we talked about a little before, and Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. Now you tell me, where is Jordan Morgan, projected to be drafted? But what kind of sticks out to me, and again, there's 2 weeks left to go, but these other guys, behind Joe Alt in the draft, Fatanu, Fuaga, Fashanu,
Yeah.
not on this list. Does it feel like they're not going to go that way? Is it just the way this list is broken out? Like, I don't know.
I do
What
want
do you
to
think there?
I didn't I left it off because it sounded like it was more of just like a combine quick meet and greet and not a full on meeting, but it does
Sure.
have on there that the Jets did meet with Fautanu and Rosengarten, the other Washington guy. So I do want to say they've at least met with Fautanu in some capacity. It hasn't been a top 30 visit. It hasn't been, an extensive private meeting, but they have talked to those guys too. So I do want to mention that. But you're right. They haven't
Sure.
met with, Fuaga in private. They haven't brought in Fashanu for a visit. Um, Jordan Morgan to me is a guy that will go end of first round, early second round. Also, just a quick note, it's funny the details on this. The information you can get that they had dinner with him before his pro day is just kind of funny to me. Just like that you can get, oh yeah, they they
Yeah.
they met over a nice steak in
Yeah.
Arizona before his pro day. Morgan is a really great fit for some zones, outside zone schemes. He is a guy too that people think can play guard and tackle. So to me, what I'm gathering most from, I'm taking Joel out
Yeah, I
because
agree. I don't
I
he will not be there. The Jets want to trade up to 5.
yeah, if he does, if you draft Joe Alt, I just don't know why you signed Tyrone Smith and traded for Morgan Moses to me. Because like now you just have a guy that you have one of the best players in this class, but he's not playing guard. He's not Troy Fautanu, where I think goes in and is pushing for John Simpson's job in training camp. Like Joe Alt is 6'8". He's not playing guard. That is a tackle and a tackle alone. So that would be one where it just like, do you just give up on Tyrone Smith after because Joe Alt's available? That would be the only thing where I'm like, okay, I don't know what the plan necessarily is or why you made the moves beforehand that you did. But looking at Jordan Morgan, looking at Fautanu, even Rosengarten, they are definitely looking for guys that you say, okay, maybe we start off their careers at guard, but they're eventually going to kick out to right or left tackle. Because Fautanu, like I said, I think he would probably beat John Simpson out for that left guard spot. At the very worst, he is, health insurance for Elijah Vera Tucker at right guard. And honestly, he's health insurance for Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith as well too. Like I
Yeah,
don't worry about
100%.
Fautanu playing any of those positions. Morgan to me might be a little bit more of a developmental guy where maybe he doesn't win the guard job day one, but he is in that rotation. I don't know though that he would be available without the Jets having to make another move. But what I'm at least taking from the offensive tackle visits is they are looking for those guys that you say, maybe they start off as a guard, maybe they start off as a tackle, but either way, we're going to have flexibility along the second unit of our offensive line, whether it is John Simpson finding his way back to the bench or one of these rookies waiting for their time and opportunity.
Yeah, and I like to see that, and the more you think about the idea of drafting a lineman with, the free agent moves that we made, the thought of getting a guy who can only play tackle, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I mean, that's fine. You're not gonna have Tyrone Smith forever. Injuries happen, that's fine. But the idea of getting someone who anywhere along those four positions with guard and tackle, if you have an injury, he is your next man up, and you're gonna get a talented player to fill that void. That is definitely really intriguing, and as a Jets fan, that's what I'm rooting for. So like when I look at these guys, Fautanu is definitely my number one if we were going to take a lineman, and I don't know if that,
Hmm.
should come with a trade back or just go ahead and take him at 10, whatever.
Yeah.
But I definitely think that is the correct approach just because we've felt what injuries can do to this offensive line. And if you're gonna kind of have that depth, why not make it a versatile piece that can kind of
Yep.
fit in wherever?
Exactly. I totally agree. Yeah, I think that's
Cool.
yeah, because like you said, Fashanu, he's a tackle. Fuaga can do both, but Alt's a tackle. So you're right. You really are just looking for these tweeners that you're like, okay, I can see a role where you have you where I can see a vision where you find your way onto a position in
Right,
2024.
exactly. Exactly. I'm gonna save the fun one for the end. So I think now we can talk a little defense. The Jets met with four defensive backs: cornerback Micah Abram out of Marshall, Max Melton out of Rutgers. You have my boy Quantez Stiggers out of Toronto.
Yeah,
What's he, a
he's in this
CHL?
CFL, Canadian
That's
Football League.
sick. That's
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah,
I'm a
Quantez
big fan of
Stiggers.
what do you call that? The secondary leagues or whatever.
Developmental leagues.
Big UFL guy. So yeah, and then safety Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. What I gather from those four guys, maybe not so much Washington State, but the combo of Marshall, Rutgers, and the Toronto Argonauts is really like we're going deep in the barrel here for our prospect hunting. Which obviously respect to those schools, but I mean, anything crazy about these guys? Any one of them that really sticks out to you?
Now, the only thing that I think is worth talking about is the fact that I do think we're in a situation where the Jets might be looking to replenish their slot corner position. And not replenish as in like we need to boost it up, but maybe we don't want to pay our guy that's currently there if the time comes. Even the other Michael Carter tweeted out, pay Michael Carter. Do you remember when that happened a few weeks
Yeah,
ago?
yeah,
Like I do think there is a scenario here where to me the top one is Max Melton. He is your kind of your slot corner. And to me, just looking at the size matchups for a few of these guys, I'm not looking at like we're taking a guy that, God, I'm trying to even find the right way. We're not looking for DJ Reed replacements in day three. We're not looking for Sauce replacements at any point because that'll never be the case. But if there is a spot in this secondary with corner, at least, I do think that you could be looking at the Jets trying to save a little bit of money because Michael Carter is a really good slot corner. And there are going to be teams when the time comes that want to pay him. And I just don't know if the Jets will want to make that a priority
yeah.
signing or dole
Uh,
out the money that it might require.
Yeah, I'm not remembering the name, but a nickel corner signed this offseason for the most, he's the highest paid nickel
Yeah,
corner in
it
the
was
league.
Kenny Moore
Uh,
with the Colts. He signed a
sure,
3-year, $30
yeah.
million deal. Yeah, so 10
I
million a
think Bryce
year
Huff, I think Bryce Huff,
or
or excuse
Michael
me,
Carter.
I think Michael Carter will get paid that or
There's a
more.
chance.
I,
There's a
I
chance.
100% think that. I think he's the best slot corner in the league.
He's a damn
He has
good
been
one.
unbelievable. Um, from that perspective, I'm totally team pay him for sure. I do recognize the fact that I want to pay everybody.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you can't
like if
always.
it was up to me, it's just pay everybody, pay everybody. But I do truly think he is, one of, if not the best slot cornerback in the league. So I think that like he deserves that respect, but it's really not. shocking for a team to be like, okay, well, we're not gonna overpay for the best corner when we can try to, get another. So that is an interesting thought. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and it's even not even Melton. Like Quantez Stiggers, when you look at his measurements, he's a slot guy. You take a look at Micah Abram. I'm looking at his measurables right now too. Like these are smaller size corners that you would think in a world of the NFL are going to line up inside of your slot. Stiggers is 5'11", 204s. He can bang a little bit, but probably not too much. Max Melton, 5'11", 187, definitely more on your size where you're not going to trust him to be outside that much. And then who is the third? Micah Abram. I want to take a look at where he measures up right now too, because that's another guy where you're just if this is another that you're fitting in at a smaller size, yeah, he's 5'9", 185. Like to me, those are all guys that are playing slot corner. And if those are the only types of cornerbacks that you're bringing in, sorry, Michael Carter, but get ready to learn free agency, buddy. What's that mean?
Yeah, and
Get ready to learn Chinese, buddy. Get ready to learn free
get ready to
agency,
learn
buddy.
Chinese. Yeah, it's almost like they take a shot on one of these guys. If it works, great. If it doesn't,
Right.
you make it. It's not like this
Exactly.
surefire thing, but it's planning ahead for, hey, maybe we don't want to pay Michael Carter next year.
You're always
Um,
planning for a year or two ahead. You're
yeah,
always looking for what contracts are up, what you're going to need, and that's why I think you're seeing them take a serious look at three corners that would all line up in the slot in the NFL.
yeah. All right, defensive tackle Mason Smith out of
I
LSU. Anything to
I
say?
I got nothing for you. He's
All
more of
right,
like a day three guy, and maybe I don't. Let me see, because I've got my IDL rankings that I'm putting out on Friday. I don't even think. Let me see where if
he's
he
on
got
them.
into my top group. He is not in my top group. Yeah, so
There you go.
we'll say I
All
know,
right, let's
and
go to the fun one.
yeah, go to the fun one.
A lot of people are wondering what are the Jets going to do at quarterback. It seems like they've made it clear they are not done adding to that position. It
Yeah.
seems like it is a when, not an if of who are they going to draft, what quarterback are they going to take a chance on. You look at this their top 30 visits, quarterback Jordan Travis out of Florida State is the name that pops out. Then there's also Michael Ayers out of Samford. According to Blake's notes, seems like that's going to be more of an undrafted free agent type of guy. Obviously, you got to do your due diligence. The Jets notes at undrafted free agency. Um, but yeah, quarterback Jordan Travis, he's the name that I've seen them connected to the Jets. When they talk about quarterback, but maybe it's just because of this top 30 visit. Do you have anything to say? I will admit my internet connection is unstable. You may be talking right now, and I
Oh,
cannot.
you can hear me. That's fun. Well, I can hear you, so I'll just take over while hopefully your connection gets a little bit back up and going. So, Jordan Travis to me is more of are you back? Did you
I'm
make it?
back.
Wow, that
Are
was
we still
cool.
potting?
Yeah, no, we got it because I could hear you and I saw right when you stopped talking, so I picked it back up.
That's literally I said a word and then my Zoom just went away and then it came back.
Nice. Well, we're back.
Well, there we
Yeah,
go.
Jordan Travis is such an unfortunate situation too, because I think if he had gotten the chance at that time, Florida State, if he's healthy, they're in the playoffs, most
Yeah,
likely.
1000%.
And I
1000%.
think being able to be on that stage would have at least put him in the same tier of a Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, where you're taking a look at them as no, they're not first or second round guys, but they're in that group right after. I would say Jordan Travis mostly is going to be a middle day three type pick. And it's tough because he had a very serious injury. There's going to take some time getting back from that, but he's a talented player. I would still say that I'd prefer Pratt or uh Spencer Rattler over him. Spencer Rattler, by the way, I'm just gonna put this out here. He is getting some late push. I have a feeling in my gut about Spencer Rattler right now, and it is that the Dallas Cowboys are going to draft him in day two.
Interesting.
Dak is due for a ton of money after next season, and I don't think Jerry Jones is ready to commit to it. And I think that you're not going to draft a first round quarterback to replace Dak Prescott, but like you're going to take him for the depth. And I could just see Jerry loving that type of transition if it were to work out. Like I think Spencer Rattler's got some insane arm talent. He was just an idiot in the beginning of his career. Quick aside on that. Let's get
He
back.
had a funny college career, just
Crazy
bouncing
one.
around.
Crazy
Yeah,
one. But he's so talented. Jordan Travis isn't like my kind of guy. He's a little bit smaller. The arm strength isn't fantastic. The injuries, 24 years old as a rookie. Like he's not a guy that you will get super excited about, but at least it's something. I don't know.
yeah,
Where do you
and
stand? Because to me, if you're not taking a guy in the first, second, third rounds, you're not really that invested. But I don't even know. Like, do you remember like the James Morgan days or some of the other castaways that would kind of find their way being a fifth round pick and then they get a spot start?
yeah,
Like, where do you stand in Jets fandom with those type of quarterback prospects?
no, yeah. I mean, it's hard. I mean, like a James Morgan is a really good example because I think he was like a fourth or fifth round pick, and he wasn't like when you look at Jordan Travis and Spencer Rattler and Bo Nix, right? Like these are guys who are not projected in the first round, but the country is very familiar with them. They've been, big names in college football for a lot of years. It feels like there is some reliability there, where like James Morgan kind of just felt like it was out of nowhere, not like he was a complete nobody, but like it was just kind of like okay. And it
Yeah,
does in a lot of ways feel like a wasted draft pick when you take a quarterback like this. If the Jets draft a quarterback, he's going to be slotting in as their third string quarterback. They have Aaron Rodgers, they have Tyrod Taylor.
they have Zach
Obviously,
Wilson.
neither of those guys, they have Zach Wilson. I obviously neither of the top two guys are like going to be here forever, but at the same time, it's like okay, 3 years down the road, do we think this fifth round quarterback that we took is really going to be the answer? You don't really know, right? So it's one of those things where it's like do you love it? Always no. But in my opinion, with these type of prospects, like a Jordan Travis is a perfect example where I think he's an okay quarterback. I don't have anything against him. And the idea that, he's coming off an injury, he is a little bit older, he's going to be a project that needs that time. It almost feels like, okay, well, if the Jets can get a little bit of a discount because this guy had an injury, they're in a position to give a player like this absolute, almost do what you wanted to do with Zach Wilson last year, where you truly are just like, this is a redshirt year. Like, unless crazy things happen, you're not going to play, you know. So, like, I'm fine with that idea and I'm fine with Jordan Travis. But to me, all these kind of names are just like, yeah, you want to throw a dart and pick them
Right.
up, go for it. Like, I'm fine with that. But are they going to be, I mean, there's a reason they're not first round picks, right? But obviously, you can hit on guys like these.
And that's what you have to do when you are in a position where, yeah, right now the Jets have a franchise quarterback, but they have one for 2 years, 3 years if we're super lucky. Like at that point, you just have to throw darts and just hope that it works out. The Colts did this for 5 years when they were bringing in Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan and Carson Wentz. They would take like their little dart throws in round 4 or 5 because, like, look, 40% of first round quarterbacks hit. Like it's not even a 50-50 in the first round. So
Right.
you're like, who can we get? Because there are those stories of those guys that come up, from nowhere. Like Dak Prescott, who we are just talking about, is kind of one of those guys, third round pick, and all of a sudden he's about to be one of the highest paid quarterbacks if he walks into free agency. So there are those situations. Kirk Cousins, a 6th round pick. Um, you never know. I do believe Jordan Travis, when you tell me that he needs time to develop, but he's already 24. What
Fair.
I at least like about him being older is that doomsday scenario. He at least has experience. And
Yeah.
he's not like a 21-year-old rookie that now you're putting in and it's like, how the fuck did we end up here? Like he is a guy that has played big games, important games in his conference as well too, multi-year starter. So I at least like the fact that he does have a little bit of experience under his belt, but I don't know. To me, like you said, it's just like, let's see what we got here, and you just
Sure.
give it a shot. Yeah,
I'm with that.
Michael Ayers, I will say I know nothing about. I
I
learned
mean, he
his
went
name
to
for the
Samford,
I learned his
which
name for
is
the first
barely a
time
Division One school.
today. I
So
learned his name today.
I think the only reason Samford is on the mind really is because they were just in the tournament. I don't think people,
Oh, I forgot
the
about that.
only other time I really think about Samford is I'm pretty sure that's where Jim gets transferred to in the office. Pretty sure he goes to Samford, Connecticut.
I think that was it. Yeah, that's definitely it.
Um, yeah, well, I hope people stuck around. I'm sure you did for the fun part of this podcast.
Yeah.
You look at these names, right? And guys that stick out, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze, Joe All, all guys that the Jets have met with that no guarantee and actually probably pretty likely that they won't even be there at the Jets pick of 10. Blake and I have talked a ton past couple weeks about the idea of the Jets trading back. Um, Seems like, easy way to add draft capital, try to get a couple extra dart throws for you. Not a ton of news about trading up, but I do think it's kind of gaining some momentum. This idea that the Jets could, make a push to go get their guy. So I just kind of want to throw that out to you and get your reaction to it and your thoughts because not the most common thing that people are talking about right now, but it is certainly a possibility when you have a guy like Joe Douglas who's willing to go get guys that he truly believes in. Maybe one of these guys on this list, maybe a Malik Neighbors if he falls a couple picks, maybe a Joe Alt, if he's sitting there at 7, 8. Like, is there a world where we make that push to jump up into the top 10?
What I like about it, and you're sitting at 10, so what at least you offer, Buffalo right now, I'll use them for an example. They're pick 28. If they want to get up into the top 10, it's like you have to give almost everything away the fall. You have to give up a first the next year. You have to give up picks, you have to give up 28 this year and more picks this year. Like you have to do a haul to jump that high. The Jets are at least fortunate to be sitting at 10 because look, to jump to 8, you're looking at probably giving away a 6th round pick this year and a third the following year. Like that's where it kind of evens out, where you're not giving up too much to move up 2 spots. I did a mock draft for the newsletter recently, and I did have the Jets trading up to pick 8 for Roma Dunze. Because I think right now you have to worry about Chicago taking him at number 9. It just makes so much sense with the transition and fit. He's basically like Keenan Allen is a great role model to have for Rome Odunze in his rookie year before Keenan hits free agency. Rome takes over. It makes a really good fit in Chicago's offense. So theoretically, I was playing with the idea that if the Jets want to go and draft one of the top 3 wide receivers, what do they have to do to get up? And the trade value chart comes out to they give up the 10th overall pick, they give up pick 185 in the 6th round, and they give up a third the following year. That is what is around in the comp to go up. What's fortunate about trading up for someone that's not a quarterback is like there is a quarterback tax. So for Minnesota to trade up to pick 5 with the Chargers one day, if they want to draft JJ McCarthy or a falling quarterback, they have to give up kind of the farm because they're going up to get their
Sure.
franchise quarterback. That costs more. But to be in a position where one, you don't have to move up too much. You have pick 10, you're just jumping 2, 3 spots max. And then 2, you're also going for a position that isn't quarterback. I don't think it'll cost as much. Um, I do like the idea of doing it. I do like the idea of doing it if it's Roma Dunze, if it's Malik Neighbors. Those are 2 top
Yeah,
7
I'm with you.
players that you'd be getting at pick 8. Let's just say it's 8 because I think Tennessee would stick at 7 and all the first 6 picks are going to be spent on, quarterbacks and Marvin Harrison Jr. So let's just do with the exercise that it's 8 necessarily. Like you don't have to give up all that much. Like sure, it's a 6th, then a third next year when you've already given up a second next year potentially for Hassan Reddick. So like yes, you are giving away the some of the meat that you have for next season, but I just you'd rather get your guy than to be sitting there at
No,
10 and
certainly.
say, like, I do love Fuaga. I'd love taking Fuaga at 10. That's good value for me. He will provide a role along the offensive line, but if they are so set on receiver and they know that they're like, let's just give Aaron Rodgers potentially the best weapons he's had in his career. Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Mike Williams, a healthy Mike Williams, a decent tight end room, nothing great, and then add Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors, like that is the best supporting cast on offense that Aaron Rodgers will have ever had in his career. He's played with great elite number one wide receivers, but the room has never been full. The running back room has never been full. Um, so to me, that's the situation I do it. I wouldn't do it for Alt. I'd do it for Rome or Malik just because they really add that like holy shit factor to the offense next season. I just rambled on. Are you there? Your internet. Are
No,
you
you're
are
good. We're
you,
cutting in a little. I cut right at the end. I cut out, so I didn't know if you had stopped
Oh,
talking or
yep.
not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But no, 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 we're here. No, and I think the big point that you made too is that like when you when you're only jumping a couple picks, right? Like if the Jets wanted to trade to five, you almost have to trade exactly what plus the value is for that pick in order to do that. Where if you're going from 10 to 8 or 10 to 7, it could be as simple as, hey, the team at 7 doesn't think that the next three teams are going to take the player that they want. So
Yeah.
they're going to just take what they can get, move back, So that is definitely like a good thought. And I do agree. I mean, Joe Alt is an interesting name because he just is like clearly that number one guy. But it's specifically with these receivers, I mean, the thought is that Romo Dunze would hopefully be there. It's starting to get less and less likely, that it seems like he won't go in that top 10. And with Malik, it's like it really does seem like he will be picked in that 6, 7, 8 range. And if he starts to fall, I mean, that's a great player that I'd be more than willing to give up a couple picks to jump up and get. So yeah, I'm totally with it. I think that this idea of trading back is really awesome, and it's easy to say, hey, just do that, add depth at multiple positions. But I do think like take the receiver room for example. You have Garrett Wilson and you have Mike Williams on the other side. Mike Williams isn't necessarily going to be healthy right away. He's, not a lock to be like super productive. Like I think Mike Williams is a good player. I do. And I think he can have a really solid year. He's not a lock to like have over 1,000 yards, he's not a lock to have over 800 yards. Like he is still somewhat of a question mark. If the
Mm-hmm.
Jets added Malik Neighbors to this room, all of a sudden it's like, hey, I don't care which one of you catches the ball, go
Someone's going to.
Right. Go out and get a ton of work and ball out. And going up and losing a little bit of draft capital to go all in on this year definitely feels a little better to me than just being like, oh, we can kind of grab a secondary guy, you know, you know. I like the idea of just going to get your guy.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have to be available, but that's where trading up comes into play. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah, it is just I understand the hesitation at times when you don't have a second round pick this year and next year you've already given up a third or second plus you also gave up what I believe a fifth for Morgan Moses. So you have moved around some picks for next year. So then if you're going to be like, okay, we gave up a third or whatnot, like
Yeah.
that could start to be like, oh, we're missing out on some day two, day three picks in 2025. But if you have a board and at 5 and 6, the value of that board is Roma Dunze, Malik Neighbors, and they're there at 8, that's value enough to go up and make the move for
Yeah.
it. So I
Yeah, and
agree.
we have to, you got to continue to be realistic about the fact that I want Joe Douglas to plan ahead and prepare for the future. But if he
Right.
fucks it up, they're not going to be
He's
around.
not here to make that pick.
Also, it's like if the Jets could make the playoffs next year, I would trade a lot of draft picks
How
next
many
year for
draft
that.
picks
You know
would
what
you
I
give up?
mean? Yeah, like I don't give a fuck. Like just give me a relevant season again. And if that requires, moving up and giving up future capital to get a Romo Dunze or a Malik Neighbors, like go ahead and do it.
That would be funny to just do a poll around New York Jets Twitter and just be like, what would you give up even out in your personal life? What would you give up to make the playoffs next
I
year?
know, and that's such a funny one because it's like to win a Super Bowl, it's like I'd give up a lot,
Would would you give
but
up
just to make the playoffs one year feels like not that big of a deal. But when it's what we've been going through, like Give me a competent offense, give me 10 wins, put me into the playoffs. I will be the happiest fucking fan in the world.
Would you give up soda to make the playoffs?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
1000. I would, yeah.
I was gonna ask you a different one, but we're at a age appropriate show here, and I don't know if we want to have those
Yeah.
conversations on air. So
I don't know if I want to say yes, but the answer is probably. Like, I would take one for the team. I really would. I really would. I'd be like, yeah. Like,
Sorry,
dude,
babe.
don't even get me started. I just want the Jets to make the playoffs. I'm looking at my fucking Sports Illustrated, frame Sports Illustrated from when we beat the Patriots. Just get me back to the motherfucking playoffs.
Yeah.
God damn it. All right, let's get out of here. Good
All right.
podcast,
Yeah.
guys.
Look, I was worried about the length. We still put this to about an hour. So surprise, surprise.
Blake and I are
We
incapable
can.
of talking not for an hour.
No, exactly. But I think this is a good range for a
Every
show.
single time we've ever said we were going to have a short show, we get to an hour.
I
So
truly thought we weren't going to make it past like 35 minutes today. I did. I was like, there's no way.
that's
But
all right.
Here we are.
Here we are.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We're a few weeks away from the draft. Get ready for a mock draft. Get ready for some final draft thoughts, post-draft reactions. It's all coming soon. Make sure to follow us on our socials at KUWTNYJ. Teddy's at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake. That's all. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.